and it's a wonderful, marvelous recording. It's just Bird at the top of his game. He's feeling happy. He's playing with a bass player who for most of the time is right in the pocket. And
Yeah.
when we got the gift from Barry's wife of these recordings, we play. Of course, immediately played the open reel tape and went, "Wow!"
Well, this project, I mean, Bird has a new album out. It's really interesting. Charlie Parker has new music, like out for people to listen to. I mean, that had to been how did all that start?
Well, a couple of years back, Verve Records issued Bird, Charlie Parker in L.A. Recordings from the Norman Sachs collection of Bird, and we had received a number of years back a lacquer recording from the John Tomino collection of Bird with Jay McShann from 1941, from February 1941, of him playing "I'm Getting Sentimental Over You"
Hmm.
and "Margie." And the band had been playing at the Century Room, and it was on located on Broadway in Midtown, and they were getting ready to record for the Decca label, and the band had recently been expanded to 12 pieces, and Bird had joined the band.
Right.
And John Tomino, to get them ready for the recording session, bought a disc cutting machine, and he recorded this lacquer. And it came in, and I was just stunned because it's Bird playing bebop in Kansas City,
Right.
particularly on "I'm Getting Sentimental Over You." And they're long rumored about a tape of Bird recorded here in Kansas City. And I'd heard about this tape of Bird allegedly with a high school drummer and a high school bass player. And you know, in the 1990s, Barry Baxter, whose father had the tape recording, uh, contacted me, and he would come by the sound archive, and we went and had lunch, but he would never play it for me, never play the recording for me. And then after he died, his wife Vicky Fullen and donated the open reel two open reel tapes and a wire recording of Bird in Kansas City from 1951. And the wire recording was the original recording, and the open reel tapes were copies. And this it was recorded in July of 1951. And Bird had been busted and lost his cabaret card.
Right.
So he came back to Kansas City and he played an extended engagement at Tootie's Mayfair, which was, quote, out in the county on 79th and Warnell. It was just past city limits, so he could stay open all night long. And so Bird was playing there, and he spent time with this guy named Phil Baxter. And Phil Baxter he was a barber by trade, and according to a lot of different sources, he was the biggest pot dealer in the Midwest. So naturally, he and Bird were close friends. But Bird, he would have these parties over at his house, and Bird would show up with this preacher in this Cadillac. And Phil and his wife Kathleen were hipsters, and they would have these elaborate parties, and Bird would attend. And there was a friend of theirs named Ray Crawford, and Ray was an engineer with Pratt and Whitney, which here in Kansas City, and he had a recording set up in his basement where he had open reel tapes and he had a wire recording. So during one of these late night sessions where Bird was jamming, Phil had Ray bring over a wire recording and record Bird. And it's a wonderful, marvelous recording. It's just Bird at the top of his game. He's feeling happy. He's playing with a bass player who for most of the time is right in the pocket. And
Yeah.
when we got the gift from Barry's wife, um, these recordings, we play, of course, immediately played the open reel tape and went, wow, just Bird's performance just shines through. And then we had the wire recording transferred. And when we got the file on that, we went, wow, wow, because the quality was really outstanding. And it's also Bird stretching out on a couple of numbers, with the lacquer disc, the 10-inch lacquer disc, you only hold 3 minutes of information.
Right.
But the wire recording could hold up to an hour of information. So you have Bird unconstrained by that 3 minute limit jamming. And he's relaxed, he's happy, and it's just an amazing recording. And so Norman Sachs contacted Ken Drucker at Verve Records about this new discovery. And Ken wanted to put out a follow up to Bird in LA, so he came up with Bird, Charlie Parker in Kansas City. And that concept, so we combined the wire recording with the disc recording from Tamino, along with four sides of the so-called Charlie White recordings, which were done here in Kansas City in probably 1944 when Bird was in town with Billy Eckstine. And Charlie White was a friend of Bird's. He was a white saxophone player. He was also a pilot and a band leader. And he would get together with Bird and jam in the late 30s, early 40s. And when Bird came to town with Eckstein, Charlie got him into the studio, a Vic Damon studio here in Kansas City, with guitarist Effergy Ware and drummer Edward Little Phil Phillips. And
It was Vic Damon. I kept thinking they're spelling Vic Damone's name wrong.
feeling what now?
I kept thinking they keep spelling Vic Damone's name wrong.
No, that's the way it's spelled. We have his collection here.
Well, obviously, they were
I
two
knew his
different
son.
people.
This has been spelled wrong. Well, Vic had a recording service beginning in 1933 where you could go in and pay him and he would record you and give you a record of your performance.
Right.
And he recorded everybody.
Gotcha.
But Charlie White did these recordings, and Bird, of course, is playing, his standard repertoire of, Cherokee and and it's a relaxed setting, and he's playing with old friends. Little Phil was quite an interesting figure here in Kansas City. He played with Harlan Leonard and also played with Jimmy Keith Band.
Mm-hmm.
And Effergy Ware played with both bands too. And Effergy Ware was older than Charlie, and here in Kansas City the traditions passed on from one generation to the other. And Effergy Ware would get together, would hold court in Paseo Park, which is right outside of 18th and Vine, directly north of 18th and Vine. And all the young cats, the Bird and the other young cats, would sit down with him and they would jam, and he would teach them all the changes and chords, all about chords and all that. He was an older musician who was passing the tradition along. And so the three came together in the studio, and just Bird, of course, on Cherokee, Bird just takes wing. And that's significant because Cherokee is the song that Bird was playing in in the Chili Parlor in 1938 with Biddy Fleet, where he was for the first time able to play what he'd been hearing in his head since Kansas City. And he, quote, came alive. And there's
Right.
two different. I mean, it was standard in his repertoire. There's two different versions of it. One recorded at the Baxter residence, and one recorded in the Damon studio. And of course, Charlie White hung on to these discs, and then Norm Sachs bought them from Charlie White, and Norm made the discs available for this set. And so that's basically, and the recordings range from 1941 to 1951,
Right.
and they really capture Bird as a kind of a blossoming soloist with the Jay McShann Band to, a seasoned improviser who dominated late night sessions.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
quite a chronicle of Bird, and it's here in his hometown. And then one of the things about about Bird in Kansas City, Bird had mixed emotions about Kansas City. He would say it's a little Jim Crow. And he was right. There was segregation, and Bird kind of was post-racial in a lot of ways. Buster Smith talked about how Bird would jam with the white guys here in Kansas City, and that wasn't done, and he played white clubs too. And he had a lot of white friends, obviously with Phil Baxter.
Bird
As,
had a white family.
yeah, exactly. And he always had integrated groups too. Uh, and so, you know, he left Kansas City in 1941, never lived here again, but he would often stop off here because of his attachment to, he was a mama's boy. He loved Addie.
And that was his home. That's where he was from.
And
Yeah.
he would stop in and spend time with Addie. But also he could hustle up a little money here by playing at places like the El Capitan and Tootie's, and on his way back home to be with Chan and his family.
Hmm.
And so, he didn't live here again, but he maintained his connection here over the
Right.
years.
Right. So
May
you
I
said
just,
there was like up. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ken.
I'm sorry, may I just quickly interrupt and ask, Ray, in one of those articles that Jeff sent me, Ray Crawford's wife was mentioned as Addie. Now, that had to have been a different Addie.
Yeah, yeah, no, that they got that one wrong. That was Addie was of course his mother. And
Yes, yeah, because she didn't sound too swinging. And Bird's mother didn't sound too swinging. Yeah.
the when Bird would travel across the country, he would often be recorded. Dean Benedetti, of course, just recorded his solos,
Right.
and over the years, a lot of recordings have surfaced, and often they're Bird playing with musicians that are not up to snuff with him.
Mhm.
So Bird is playing with the musicians that are really his peers, except for this bass player on the Phil Baxter section. He gets lost a little bit, but generally he's in
Hmm.
the pocket. But a lot of those live recordings are marred by performances by musicians who are not as accomplished as Bird.
Well, very few musicians were as accomplished as Bird during that time, because he was just such a revolutionary.
Well, that was one of the things that was really frustrating to Bird when he lost his cabaret card and he had to go out and travel, and he didn't have a regular band. He would have to play with pickup groups,
Yeah.
and they often were not up to him, up to his level.
Yeah.
And he was very tolerant of younger musicians, and he brought them along. Probably because he was humiliated on the bandstand of the Reno Club by Joe Jones, and he, um, was very, very forgiving of younger musicians, but often he would have to play with pickup bands, and that
Hmm.
was very frustrating to him.
Hmm.
Bird was very
Hmm.
tolerant,
Yeah, he was.
You
and
mentioned
and
that,
Phil and Phil Woods was very tolerant
yeah, I bet.
of other
They're closer.
musicians as well.
Yeah. You mentioned that you got up to an hour of uh, tape and wire recordings. Do you have any more that you haven't released that we want to hear of Charlie Parker?
No, unfortunately not, but
Uh,
I'm sure something else will turn up. I regret, I tried to get a hold of the family. I tried to contact the family that had Honey Body, the recording that he did probably about 1938 at
mm-hmm.
the old Wonderland Arcade here in Kansas City for Addie.
Mm-hmm.
And the family was not responsive. And that collection is here at the university too, but the disc was not there. And I also wanted to include the Bird with the Herd. When Bird
Right.
was in town in July, he also sat in with Woody
Woody
Herman
Herman.
Band at the
Yeah.
Municipal Auditorium.
Yep.
And the Herman Band came to town and they played at the music hall for white audiences, and then followed it up with a concert for racially mixed audience at the Municipal Auditorium, which was the big municipal building here in Kansas City.
Hmm.
And Bird showed up that night and sat in with him. And and there was a recording. Irby Green, I believe it was, made an open reel tape recording, and there's a recording of it in the Smithsonian collection. But unfortunately, the Smithsonian couldn't get it together to get a copy to me to use for this
Re-
project.
There's a released version too that's out there. You can find it on Apple Music and Spotify. It's his recordings with Woody Herman are out there.
Yeah, well, I was hoping to get closer to the source
Right.
recording because the quality is I mean, the original recording was done by they put an open reel tape under the trombone share,
Hmm.
and I was hoping to get a better copy of it and include that.
Right.
And the Barry Baxter, who had the wire, was very attached to Bird. When Bird would go over to Phil and Kathleen Baxter's place, he connected with Barry, and he was Barry's godfather. And when Bird went to play with the Herd, he took Barry with him and took Barry out on his shoulders on stage, and Barry never forgot that. And I think
Hmm.
one of the reasons Barry was reluctant to share it with other people is he held it so close, it was so personal to him.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
mean, he would come over here and hang out and drive me crazy because he would never bring the tapes over. He promised to, but he never did.
Hmm.
And I think
Uh,
at one point they were looking at issuing it, issuing the wire recording because the one of the tapes was a 10-inch tape and had leader tape in between the tracks, but they didn't.
Uh,
Phil kept it close in Barry, and then after we received it, I went, wow. And, we're going to have to do something with that and combine it with the Tamino recording and then the Charlie White recordings and showcase Bird here in Kansas City.
right. 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 So, how did his family there in Kansas City respond? Have they contacted you? Yeah, that are there in Kansas City.
Well, there still family here. One of his grandsons are here.
Yeah.
Of
Hmm.
course, Leon was in Denver, and we worked with Jam Pole, who
Yep.
represents Bird's estate on this
Yep.
set. So
Okay.
the family is getting compensated for the recording. They get a
That's
part of the
great.
royalty.
That's great.
You know, Evidently, from my conversation with Barry and other people, the Baxters remain close with Addie too. It went beyond Bird,
Wow.
and they would check in with Addie often.
Wow.
You
that's
know,
nice. That's nice.
the
My mother stayed close to Addie too,
yeah,
to the
well,
year.
Hmm.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's a real close knit community here, particularly with the African American community, which was constrained by segregation and centered around
Right.
18th and Vine.
Right.
And everybody knew everybody else. So everybody knew about Addie and where she lived.
Yeah.
And so people would check in with her when they came to town.
Right. Right. How long
Chuck,
did it take?
oh, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Kim.
Go ahead.
How long did it take from, say, when you got the okay to do something with these recordings to the actual release, which I believe was sometime in October, right,
Yeah, October
of
25th,
2024? Right.
about a year and a half.
Oh, wow. Only that
I
much.
did the
Okay.
liner notes and worked with Verve very closely on the liner notes. We did the transfer on I'm Getting Sentimental Over You and a Margie, the disc recording, and we did a flat transfer. This disc, John Tomino really loved that record,
Hmm.
and he played it over and over again. And by the time we received it, it suffered some pretty severe groove damage.
Hmm.
So we just did a flat transfer, and then I wasn't really happy with the sound we were getting out of that. It was really noisy, had a lot of surface noise, a lot of distortion. So Seth Winter, who is really an audio wizard, cleaned it up and brought out the audio. And it's for the first time you're really hearing it. And it had not been published before. Part of it had been published with a website that and an exhibit that I did called Saxophone Supreme: The Life and Music of Charlie Parker. But we just put part of it up. We didn't put all of it up. So it's there
Right.
for the first time. And it's amazing because it's the Jay McShann band, and then Bird just takes wing. And of course, one of the things about that generation, Bird's generation, he and Gillespie, is they come up out of the big band tradition, but they don't get enough solo space
Hmm.
on stage. That's why they would get together and jam after hours, and that's where bebop comes from. But
Mhm.
here, Jay McShann was a very different band leader than Cab Calloway. Cab would not let Gillespie, Dizzy, participate in late night sessions, and he wouldn't give him solo space. But with Jay McShann, he loved Bird, and he let Bird do his thing. So here we have, the big band comes in. Joe Coleman's the vocal on it, and it's a pretty traditional vocal style. And then the band, states the theme, and then Bird just takes wing. They were playing at the Century Room was a white club, and young dancers from the what we call the country club set here, where the wealthy people live in the country club area. They would flock to the Century Room to dance to the Jay McShann band. But the Jay McShann band is playing a repertoire of things like I'm Getting Sentimental Over You, Margie, pop standards basically for dancers. But on this particular recording, for some reason, Bird just stretched out on it,
Hmm.
seized that opportunity.
Hmm.
Marvelous
But then the
performance.
dancers could stretch out.
Pardon me?
Then the dancers could stretch out as well.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why they loved it too.
The jitterbug. And
Yeah.
and Tamino was the he owned the Century Club and Century Room, and he also managed Fairland Park at one time. And the McShann band played extended summer engagements at Fairland Park, which was a white amusement park, 79th and Prospect. And that's how Jay first met John. And then when John opened the Century Room, the McShann band played their residency there and toured locally, the territories here locally. And then John went on to manage the band and travel with the band. So he had a vested interest in getting the band ready to record. And of course,
Hmm.
a few months after that initial recording that Tamino did, the band went to Dallas and recorded "Confessin' the Blues," "Hootie Blues," and a number of other recordings. And "Confessin' the Blues" hit it big nationally, and that really established the band nationally. And they also signed with MCA. We know with
Right.
Gale's agency, excuse me, not MCA. And
Right.
so they broke
Right.
out nationally on the success of that hit. But this precedes that and shows
Hmm.
a different side.
Hmm.
And if you
Hmm.
listen to Bird's solo on Hootie Blues, it's really kind of restrained. But the solo when I'm Getting Sentimental Over You, man, he's like, wow, 16th
Yeah.
note, double time, it's all there.
Yeah, it's
Because the
beautiful.
one is live, though, isn't it? Which one isn't the one on this recording? Isn't it a live performance?
The live recording is the wire recording from
Right.
'51 over at Phil Baxter's place.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's the live one there. And it's kind of funny because you hear Bird puts a little coda at the end of each song to let the engineer know he's wrapping things up and the bass player knows
Right.
to get out.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah, I
it's Bird,
noticed that.
Bird unfettered, late night. He's happy. His chord extensions in there you don't hear on his normally in his other recordings, as Bobby Watson observed. And so it's just a real pleasure, putting this set together and making it available. It's like a new chapter in Bird's life.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm
definitely
so
heard.
glad that Jeff sent me some of those articles because I did not know about lacquer recordings versus wire recordings. I didn't know. And so when I first started to hear the album, the new Bird album, I thought, why doesn't he give like the Cats like a solo, man? It's all about Bird. But but then when I was reading, I realized that like he had to wrap it up. He was just like, he had to jam it all together because he probably only had 3 minutes. He was just blowing. So yeah, he didn't have time for a bass solo. He's like zipping along, and like nobody gets to play. Nobody gets a solo.
other than Bird. Yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
gets a solo.
Now,
But
some of this was pre-recorded. Isn't, I mean, pre-released already. The 44 stuff, right? The year from, because that's what the interviews, they interviewed you. Some of those interviews said that some of of the 13 recordings, 4 of them were already released or something like
Yeah,
that.
they had been released over a period of time, but sonically, it's a superior issue.
Okay.
It sounds much better. It's more
And those are the
dynamic
ones
and
from
it's clear.
1944 that were already, the
Yeah,
other ones are new.
Carl Woidak places those at in 1942,
Hmm.
but there's one track on there, and it's "My Heart Tells Me." It wasn't published until 1943,
Oh,
and
okay.
so it became a big hit in '43. So, and I looked through when I did my book on Bird: The Life and Music of Charlie Parker. I went through the Kansas City Call, the microfilm, this was the African American newspaper, and made copies of all the music references, including when Bird was in town.
Hmm.
And Bird came to town in '44 with Dizzy with the Billy Eckstine Band. And at that time, it featured Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan. And I think that's probably when it was recorded
Right.
because it was a big hit the year before, and it's not typical to Bird's repertoire. But then again, he drew from a wide variety of sources, for his music
Hmm.
when he was
Hmm.
doing his improvising on the changes of pop songs.
Hmm. Hmm. Did you have any, pushback, any problems as you was putting this together? Did anyone say, you know, any problems at all with copyright or with record companies or with family?
Copyright didn't come into play because it's all Bird, and we were working with
Okay.
Jampol.
Okay.
And the main thing was just the back and forth between me and Verve Records. I had to write the liner notes. They and I co-produced it. We did not. We were going to originally use a picture of Phil Baxter and Bird at the barber shop, but we couldn't get the kind of perpetual use permission that Verve wanted.
Hmm.
So we ended up using an image of Bird here in Kansas City from 1938 from a UMKC Kangaroo yearbook back when it was a university, back when it was Kansas City University. And Bird was playing at this place called the Jelly Joint for the UMKC students, UKC students, and it was a little coffee shop where they'd get together in a snack shop, and Bird was playing there, and somebody took a picture of him, and it ended up in the yearbook. And my colleague Stuart Hines said, you know what Charlie Parker looks like? I said, oh yeah. He said, look at this picture, and there's a picture of Bird playing the saxophone in 1938 in a yearbook for the University of Kansas City students, and we used that on the cover, and I'm
Hmm.
really happy we used it because it's a great image, and it's the
Hmm.
only image of Bird playing his horn in Kansas City.
Hmm.
So we
well,
were able to use that, and plus, since it was UMKC property, we could give them the rights, perpetual rights for that.
Right.
But it
Right.
was, and then the when we did the transfer on the I'm Getting Sentimental Margie, I sent it to Verve, the raw file to Verve, a WAV file, just a flat transfer. And they were able to clean it up some, but it wasn't quite right. You notice there's a disclaimer on the back of it. I mean,
Right.
because that disc was beat up. And so, but Seth Winter really straightened it out and was able to bring it out for the first time.
Mm.
And it's just a marvelous performance.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Does sound nice and clean. Has any like world renowned musicians or saxophones? I know Bobby Watson was involved, but I, I'm just wondering if anyone has reached out to you since it's been out. It's been out for a decent while and it's new. I mean, I'm sure all the people, this is new music for a saxophonist to learn about Charlie Parker. Practically every note he has ever played has been transcribed and analyzed. And now it's some new music for people to transcribe and analyze. So has anyone reached out and said,
Well, I reached out to Carl Wojdak on when I to play him made the music available to him, and he was, of course, he's transcribed all of Bird's solos, and he's
mm-hmm,
authority on Bird. He was very very impressed with it,
mm,
and Bobby, and of course, is one of the keepers of the flame of Kansas City Jazz here, so he's enamored. But I have gotten good feedback in the press. The press has been just fabulous on it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's great. It's just exciting, you know. I mean, the idea that it seems like every decade, though, some new Charlie Parker is found, like you were saying, you know. So this is,
But I'm sure there's new gems out there that are hidden that we'll have to dig up and make available.
Well, there's all my mother's tapes.
Yeah. Well, Kim, well, let's do it.
there you go. Kim, you got a bunch of stuff
I,
there.
it's a snake pit.
Well, it doesn't have to be. Kim, why don't you come back to Kansas City, bring them here, and we'll transfer them and see what we have.
Well, Phil Schaap did that. He did the legwork.
Well, Phil is
They're all on CD.
I
Oh,
can't
okay.
remember. Phil's collection recently went to an institution, and I can't remember which
Well,
institution it
they're
was.
not his. I mean, they're not his that I know of. I mean, they shouldn't be his.
Right.
Do you still have the tapes?
Yeah.
Well, let's transfer them and make them available.
Well,
There you
they're
go.
transferred onto CD, and
So they've already been released, is what you're saying.
no, I don't think so. I mean, who owns them? I own them, don't I? I don't know. I don't know. Listen, I've been down the road with this stuff with my mother my entire life. So I'm really skittish about the whole thing. To get the horn sold to the Smithsonian was like about as far as I could go,
Right.
That was a big hurdle for me to get done. And I mean, I would have to turn the camera around to show the painting, the oil painting that Bird did of Pre, which is over my shoulder here, to show
I,
Chuck. I would like to get that sold to the Smithsonian. I would like to have that. I would like to have that beside Bird's the painting of Bird in the Smithsonian. I mean, not the painting of Bird. Excuse me. I would like to have
the
that with
horn.
Bird's horn in
Yeah.
the Smithsonian. It is Bird's painting of Pre, because it would just be beautiful
Well, you can
beside
always
it.
approach the African American Museum. That's where it's at.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
where it's
you've dealt
at.
with them
That's
before, so
Well,
Yeah.
I sold it through Christie's. They made the negotiation to find a buyer for the horn to give to Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian doesn't buy anything. They
Right.
don't buy anything.
Right.
They find donors. They get
Well,
donors.
that's the way most institutions operate.
Yeah.
But you
Right.
can always make provisions for it to go to them eventually too.
Well, I'd like to see if I have enough money to live out the rest of my life, or if I need to cash something in. I wanted to ask you before we get off this subject, if because I can't recall, I did know it one time, but I can't recall what happened to Dean Benedetti's tapes. Do you remember what happened? There was something weird.
Well, they have been they were actually disc recordings. Originally, they thought they were wire recordings, and then when they found them in Italy with Dean Benedetti's brother, they turned out to be disc recordings, and Mosaic transferred all of those and made them available.
Oh,
Yeah, those are out.
they
Yeah,
Yeah.
were
they're available
out?
on the Mosaic label. Yeah, they did a good job too.
Yeah, I have some of those.
Wow,
I
why
have,
did I think
yeah.
something weird happened? Like he
No,
destroyed them or something? I don't know.
I
You know,
have those on CD. Yeah.
Huh.
they were when Benedetti died. There was a question of where the recordings were, and they were tracked down to Benedetti's brother, who was in Italy, and
Yeah,
then
I know
Mosaic
because my
issued them.
my mother corresponded with his sister for a while, I know, but um but after my mother died, I don't, I don't know what happened after my mother died. So I don't know if they came out after my mother died and I just didn't know or what. My mother died 9999,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
a date that will live in history
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
infamy.
Well,
At any rate,
it's
I'm
kind of
sorry.
funny. I always say that I used to hang out with the old guys. Now I am the old guy.
Yeah, right, right, right.
But I'm still discovering things about Bird. It's an ongoing. I'm a student of Bird, lifelong student of Bird, really.
Well,
Hmm.
one thing that I
Hmm.
wanted to say, make sure that I got to say, I don't know if, I don't know if, I don't think I read the liner notes for the album unless they were in incorporated in some of the articles that were sent. Um, but I was pleased to see some of the things that were sort of transcribed from your book on Bird, Chuck, because I was happy to see those sort of come to life again for people to experience, and because you brought those to life,
Hmm.
all
Hmm.
the, all that information to life. And without
Hmm.
you, I don't think people would know any of that stuff.
Hmm.
Wrote my book is that so much of what was written about Bird, about his later life, and Ross Russell sensationalized his life. But there hadn't been much written about Bird in Kansas City, and that's one of the things that I wanted to write about, and and bring forth that because he lived his first 20 years here in Kansas City, and he only lived to be 34 years old.
Hmm.
Right.
You
Hmm.
know, and you know, and he's a culmination of the Kansas City tradition. And I would talk to these guys like Ahmed Aladdin and Lukman Hamza, who were the next generation after Bird of musicians, and they would talk about seeing Bird in the neighborhood, walking through the neighborhood with his horn in a paper bag, or
Hmm.
standing out in front of the Boulevard room, and Bird's standing out there, and his aunt comes up, and he starts talking to his aunt, and she wants to hear him play, and he said, "Well, let's step inside." And she said, "I'm a church lady, I can't go in a bar." So here
Right.
he's sitting out there playing for his aunt on the street on
Yeah.
12th Street. It's just there's some wonderful stories about him, and he'd been so misrepresented too in a lot of the biographies. Uh, you didn't have to sensationalize Bird's life because he did enough to sensationalize his own life.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
He
Jazz
was,
Joyce
and
Lawrence
he was
Illustrated.
sweet. He was sweet. You
Mm,
know,
mm, mm.
he would
Was there
play
any
for his
type
hand on the corner.
was there any type of record release party or anything like that in Kansas City? I mean, this is about Bird in Kansas City. So what was there a celebration of sorts?
But yeah, we did a. Are you talking about the celebration recently of this release?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, last Saturday, I did a program here in the Miller Nichols Learning Center in the atrium, and I curated this exhibit for Bird Centennial called "Saxophone Supreme: The Life and Music." Saxophone Supreme: The Life and Music of Charlie Parker with the American Jazz Museum, and so it's 12 panels. It's also available online.
Hmm.
So we put up the exhibit, and then we had a reception that afternoon, and Bobby Watson played with his trio at the reception, and then I talked about this new set and played musical examples and did a PowerPoint around it. And
Hmm.
so there were 200 people there.
Wow.
It was great. And I had done something on Bird's birthday, a kind of a sneak preview at the Gym Theater with the American Jazz Museum. But we had a big celebration. Yeah, I'm just getting lots of press locally. There's lots of interest in it. And I think we're just beginning to see the coverage, the major, the big time Downbeat and the rest of the jazz publications haven't reviewed it yet, but that's coming, and that'll come
I'm
the first
sure.
of the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
The Associated Press reviewed it, and so all these not small, but newspapers across the country picked up on it and republished the AP article. And that's
Hmm.
the first wave of publicity, and now we're seeing more
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So
good.
I'm really happy with it, with the coverage, and
Mm-hmm.
happy with it the way it's been received. The reviews have been great.
Yeah, it sounds really good. It's just exciting for people who love Charlie Parker. New unheard bird, as that one record called it.
Yeah,
Some
it's a
of
new
his stuff.
chapter in his life in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's great. It's really, really, and it was really interesting to hear him with, say a sax trio, sax, bass, and drums, which which was dated. But Sonny Rollins did a lot of that, and he sort of made that popular, the sax, bass, and drums. And then here it is, a recording of Bird doing it, probably a full decade before Sonny Rollins was even on the map, per se. Um, and it's beautiful, him without, a traditional chord accompanist. Um, and, the chord changes are just flowing through,
Oh yeah,
it's,
he's happy.
yeah.
He's at the top of his game. He's happy, and he's enjoying himself, and he's really flexing his musical muscles in those recordings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like I said, he had mixed emotions about Kansas City, but he always came back here.
How can you get this record? I mean, other than Spotify, what if somebody wants to buy an actual record?
Well, if
Because
you just
records are popular now again.
all you have to do is just Google Charlie Parker, Kansas City Verve, and there are a lot of record stores, online record stores, that are offering it for sale.
Oh, so it's
And
out it's out there for sale now.
yeah, or you can come here to
Okay.
Kansas City and go to Mills Records and
Yeah.
tell Judy I sent you, and she's got copies. The local record store got in a box 25 copies, Mills Record Company, and they sold it out in 10 days, and she was scrambling to
Wow.
get more in.
Wow.
And all the local stores are selling it, and it's be available in the American Jazz Museum too. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
widely available, and it's to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
really nice that
Mm-hmm.
he's getting exposure once
Mm-hmm.
again.
Again. Yeah. Which one is your favorite of all of these? Which one of these? Which one?
Oh, it's Cherokee from the Charlie White session.
Okay.
It's just such an exuberant performance, and it's just I love that song anyway, and to hear Bird playing it, it always kind of like the latest manifestation of the song. I mean, he recorded it a number of times, played it a lot, and was recorded subsequently. But that's my favorite track on the whole album.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That and Bird, that and the on the 1951 Wire recording session, the Phil Baxter recording, Song 2 also. And what's interesting about those improvisations that that are the first three, four tracks on the CD or LP, he's quoting like Kim and his own songs and Buttons and Bows. And Roy Haynes talks about how Bird would, when he was on the bandstand, would quotes from songs. If a woman walked in, a pretty woman walked in, he'd say, "A pretty woman is like a melody." He'd quote that,
Right.
and he quotes
Right.
his own songs. And another thing that I think is real interesting, the way he plays, "I Found a New Baby." It's a different side of Bird because he's paying homage to Lester Young, and he's swinging. It's Kansas City style. It's like pat your foot music.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that one too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just real pleased with the issue and glad that it's available.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all are. We all are. So what's next for you? I mean, you've done so many great things for Charlie Parker as well as just Kansas City Jazz. I mean, I'm sure they really appreciate your work. What's next?
Well, I'm talking with the American Jazz Museum about doing a retrospective on Kansas City Jazz for the World Cup, a display on Kansas City Jazz. Now, there's a chapter when I did the Kansas City book, I really cut it off at 1943, and the tradition really didn't end there. It continued on. Tradition jams on, as we say here in Kansas City. So I want to concentrate on those later years of Kansas City jazz and some of the cats that come up then. You
And have
know,
it available when the World Cup
yeah, have
is.
it as an exhibit available in the World Cup.
Well,
And
you
I
know,
also,
my son is on the national team.
oh really?
Yeah,
Congratulations, that's wonderful.
Miles Robinson, he
Yeah.
is on the national team, the men's national soccer team. So that would be exciting.
And
Yeah.
also, I've been threatening to do a book on the Coon Sanders original Nighthawk Orchestra, a white dance band that came out of Kansas City.
Wow.
And I would really like to do that. And then there's lots of other stories to tell, about the music scene here, rock and roll and folk scene here too, because I have one foot in that also. So I'll
Hmm.
continue, doing my thing here locally
Hmm.
and
And you
documenting
have a
history.
radio show too, right? Don't you have a radio show?
Yeah, I have a radio show called The Fish Fry every Friday and Saturday night from 8 to midnight. Blues, soul, rhythm and blues, jump and jive, and zydeco on public radio station KCUR. It's 89.3 on your FM dial, or you can tune in online at kcur.org. And I've been doing that for 39 years.
Wow.
Chuck
I've
is a
been with the
busy,
station for 40
busy
years.
man. He's a busy man.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I'm doing the fish fry, working the sound archive, and I'm teaching Kansas City Jazz history at the Art Institute, which is a real kick because the students really get it and they're so brilliant, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so
And he,
You got to bring Kim in there and interview Kim for your
I
class.
would love it.
and then you still got that same old tired ass car.
Am I driving the same old car? Yeah, the 2004 Honda Accord.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was an old car.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
have a history with old cars in Kansas City, and they're usually and they're not cleaned up old cars. They're kind of old junkers.
yeah. I remember. I
But Kim,
remember.
we'd love to have you come back next year.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. I want to come back when Vern is still around. I miss seeing Vern.
Yeah. Well, I'm in touch with Vern, so I'll send him an email and let him know that we talked and you were asking about him. It'll do his heart good.
Oh, I speak with him quite often.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I try not to tire him out.
Well, I'm glad to see you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay.
I've been lifting weights.
Oh wow.
I go to the Genesis gym and work. All these buff guys are there, working out, and I do my upper lower body, and I go in about 3 times a week and
Oh,
work out.
if
No.
I lifted a weight, it would kill me.
Yeah, it's helped my core quite a bit.
No, no, no.
That's
My
good.
my core, I lifted too many weights and my body is dead.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, that's what hurt my body is lifting.
Well, you know, Kim has some stuff on Spotify. Chuck, you should go
Oh,
listen to it. It's really great.
speaking of Herbie Green, yeah, Jesse Green and I recorded, I guess about 2 years ago. We laid down 3 tracks that are on, that are out,
On
that are
Spotify.
new. I
Yeah.
got a whole lot of old stuff that's online.
I'll have to check that out. Well, you know
Yeah.
what's so encouraging is how vibrant the jazz scene is today, and the young players coming up. And Samara Joy, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
she's just fabulous, you know, and all
Really
these
is.
younger players coming up, and to keep keeping the tradition alive.
No,
Yeah,
I
well,
agree.
I'm glad.
I agree.
I don't
I
get
agree.
out much.
It's so good talking with you guys.
Yeah,
Really.
you
Yes.
too. You too. So, I mean, we should probably wrap this up, but it's been a great interview. It's been a lot of fun. It's
Well, I
been
had a
very
lot of fun.
informative.
I feel like I've known you forever, Jeff. And of course, I have known Kim for a long time. It's like saying,
Yeah.
it's good. I don't have many people I can talk to that get it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, Charlie Parker is universal, and there will never be another Charlie Parker.